The reporting of the results and circumstances surrounding the 2020 Iowa Democratic Party caucuses were unacceptable. As chair of the party, I apologize deeply for this.
Can anyone trust you now?
A day late and $1 short. The first results from the Iowa caucus just revealed a short time ago, nearly 24 hours late. A technical glitch is apparently to blame. Some candidates are confused, others outraged. That is how we started the 2020 presidential election. Now we are off to the races. At this hour, President Trump may be making last-minute edits to his State of the Union speech. He is the first president facing impeachment in the midst of a campaign for re-election. Will he bring up the elephant in that room? Right now, dozens of Americans are preparing to fly out of China. That nation is, of course, grappling with the coronavirus as it continues to spread. We'll hear from one of the evacuees. And the emotional confrontation during a meeting in a Michigan school. A father describes his son bearing the brunt of racism and the shocking response from another father in the room. A glimpse of America in 2020. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Certainly a lot to get to tonight. Taking a live look now at the Capitol, where the president will soon be making his way there to deliver his State of the Union address. But we begin with the confusion and uncertainty that marked the start of the 2020 campaign. After a night of chaos in Iowa, the votes are just now finally coming in. At this hour, Pete Buttigieg with a slight lead. You may recall he declared victory last night well in advance of the first official tallies. And now, one day later, and still only 62% of the votes are in. As you saw at the top of the show, the chair of the Iowa Democratic Party has apologized for this mess. The candidates did not wait for the official results. Many of them last night boarded flights heading to New Hampshire. On to the next stop, where the first primary takes place next week, and that's where we find our Whit Johnson.
Even with Iowa in chaos, former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg arrived in New Hampshire determined to take a victory lap.
We are arriving with the momentum in the 2020 presidential campaign right now, and we had a victorious night in Iowa that shocked opponents.
He was banking on an Iowa bounce.
Just in case you haven't been glued to your phone the last few minutes, official, verified caucus results are coming in from the state of Iowa. They're not complete, but results are in from a majority of precincts, and they show our campaign in first place.
The preliminary results put Buttigieg neck and neck with Bernie Sanders, who is also anticipating his own success in Iowa. Today, the senator's frustration was palpable.
We should all be disappointed. There's no excuse for not having results last night.
Elizabeth Warren declaring partial results from the Iowa Democratic Party is just not good enough.
I think they ought to get it together and release all of the data.
So they should wait till they have it all.
But former Vice President Joe Biden perhaps looking to put Iowa behind him, saying there's no rush.
Let's give them time. We don't know precisely how many delegates we have or how many we'll get, but I feel really good about getting more than our fair share.
Tonight, the Iowa Democratic Party is under fire for the debacle, which the chairman blamed on a coding error in the Caucus app.
As chair of the party, I apologize deeply.
But the turmoil seeming to give at least one of the candidates a new lease on life.
What an amazing night we had last night. I'm someone that thrives in chaos. You want a steady hand in chaos, right?
The caucuses were supposed to sort out the field, winnow it down. And tonight, in a sea of frustrated Democrats, one man was smiling.
I hear something happened in Iowa, or didn't happen. I don't know which. Still can't figure that out.
Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg skipped Iowa altogether. He's focusing on Super Tuesday. And today, the billionaire announced he's doubling the amount of money he's spending in this fight.
And Whit Johnson joins us now live in Milford, New Hampshire at a Sanders campaign event. So, Whit, this was, of course, not the day after Iowa anyone was prepared for, and the Sanders campaign seems particularly unhappy with how this all played out. How are his supporters there reacting to the confusion in Iowa?
Who has given the middle?
Well, Lindsay, despite the frustration, despite the mess, disaster that played out in Iowa, as you can hear behind me, Bernie Sanders supporters, they are energized, they are hopeful, they're motivated, they like what they're hearing coming out of Iowa and those preliminary results. Bernie Sanders' campaign is saying that more people actually turned out for Bernie at those caucus sites than any other candidate. But because he is neck and neck with Pete Buttigieg, they can't claim that full victory that they really wanted to have coming out of Iowa and then coming here to New Hampshire. Bernie Sanders himself called it a disappointment, and he said that the Iowa Democratic Party was negligent by not releasing those results in a timely manner.
And as you mentioned, this likely did very little to winnow the field at all. So what does this mean now for the role of New Hampshire going forward?
In Chicago in 1963.
Well, the New Hampshire primary, Lindsay, now becomes that much more important. 1 week for today for candidates like Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg. This could really solidify and cement front-runner status. For Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, this could be make or break and perhaps determine how far they can go in this race. And then for Joe Biden, who's currently sitting in 4th place out of Iowa, this will be a huge test to prove that he is, in fact, the most electable candidate fit to beat Donald Trump, a claim that he's been making on the campaign trail. Lindsay?
All right, Whit Johnson on the trail with us. Thank you for that live report. But there are still so many questions about what happened in Iowa. And our Tom Yamas was in the room in Iowa as officials there apologized. So Tom, just to start us off, give us a sense of the anatomy of a botched caucus, if you will, how this all played out.
Lindsay, good evening. Well, it all played out. At first, things seemed to be going pretty well. People were wrapping up the caucuses. At first, over the first 2 hours, it looked like things were right on schedule. And then suddenly, the precinct chairman started realizing they couldn't report the data that was coming in from the more than 1,600 precincts all across the Hawkeye state. Now, there was a backup. There was a phone bank that they could call these results in. The problem was they didn't man enough phones, and the wait times were longer than an hour. So, coupled with the discrepancies in the app, because there seemed to be a coding problem with the app, all of that sort of convoluted and got all mixed in together. It snowballed into just what was the biggest political catastrophe Iowa has seen in a long time. The problem here, Lindsay, is that they've had problems the last 2 caucus go-arounds. Last time around, the Democratic caucus here with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton winning with a razor-thin margin. And then just before that, Rick Santorum came out on top. But because it was so close again, because of reporting discrepancies, he really couldn't ride that wave of momentum into New Hampshire. People here are confused. They were upset. It still remains the biggest political mystery in the Democratic world right now. It's still unclear who exactly won the Iowa caucuses. They are reporting some results, but only 62% of the state. We're coming on 24 hours, Lindsay, since the voting started almost, and we still don't have a declared winner in Iowa. And that makes a lot of people, especially the campaigns, the campaign volunteers, the staffers who put so much time into this state, more than a year's worth of work. And right now, they really have nothing to show for it.
Right, and as you just said, the candidate's putting so much into Iowa, but there's been a lot of discussion today whether the entire caucus system is obsolete and should be ended. How are Iowans on the ground reacting to that?
Well, look, I can tell you this from when we were reporting last night over 5 hours right here on ABC News Live, we were hearing from our Democratic sources, our entire team, people were frustrated. The campaigns were upset. Elected officials were upset. The heads of the DNC were upset. And they really blamed the local party here in Iowa. But the chairman came out here. He took full responsibility. He said this is unacceptable. It's interesting. We were, working around Iowa today, going around and just little things like going to lunch or grabbing coffee. And people would talk to us. We would talk to some of the locals, and they'd say, do you guys know anything? They were curious as well, and I think they were upset. And I have spoken to some Iowa party officials, people who work in Democratic politics here, and they're clearly frustrated because they love being the first in the nation. They love the attention they get because maybe the mainstream media doesn't cover this part of the country as much as they should. Yes, Iowa is not the most diverse state, so maybe it's not the best state for Democrats, but it is the middle of the country. People here have certain values. They have farmers here. There's different industries here. So it gave Iowa sort of this upper hand in the political process. They had this favorability scale. They were able to come here and get attention. And if they take away the Iowa caucus as being the first in the nation, it's going to be really tough on the voters here. And it will change the process because, as Alex Castellanos, one of our panelists, said yesterday, it makes candidates better because they have to come here, Lindsay. They have to speak, but they also have to listen. They have to do several events. They have to spend time here with real people, and they constantly are campaigning over a year. It's not like like you can just fly in, give a speech, and fly out. Sometimes people do that. Donald Trump tried to do that. He ended up losing the Iowa caucus. You actually have to be disciplined. You have to be on message, and you have to press that flesh, meet the Iowans here, get to know them, and really sell yourself. And the person who wins the Iowa caucus doesn't always win the presidential race, but at least the focus is here, and they hear what people really want. The #1 issue for Iowans, wrapping up for the polls, of course, was health care. Lindsay?
But no doubt the debate is going to continue to ramp up about whether or not Iowa should continue to go first. Tom Yamas in Iowa, thank you very much for that. The chaos in Iowa is, of course, raising questions about election integrity heading into 2020 as well, and whether enough is being done to keep the ballot box safe from interference or errors. And our next guest says that the app Iowa was using last night, quote, failed spectacularly. So let's now bring in Maurice Turner with the Center for Democracy and Technology. Welcome, first of all, to ABC News Live. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's be clear. The problems with Iowa we're told were not related to hacking, but what went wrong here exactly, and how could this have been avoided?
Well, what we saw were reports of coding errors with the app. We heard about people having trouble logging in, and just plain user error when it comes to using the app as it's supposed to be used.
How secure is our election system at this point, in your estimation?
Our election systems are far more secure than they were even just 2 years ago, and they are leagues beyond what we saw in 2016. State officials, local officials, federal agencies have all come together to work to make sure that voters can be confident that their vote won't be changed. But that doesn't help when we have incidents like this, where there's small operational issues and small technical issues early on in the process.
How attractive is a debacle like this to bad actors, realizing that there are vulnerabilities in our voting system?
This is actually a best-case scenario for malicious actors who are looking to use misinformation to their advantage. These small incidents, because they are true, are able to be wrapped up and spread as viral messages that can go all around Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms, and they're really hard to control.
And Maurice, before you go, just one last question for you. What should have been the plan B here? Should it have just been reduced to a notepad and pen, as we saw?
There should have been more testing as part of Plan A. Election technologies need to be accessible to researchers so that security vulnerabilities, usability can all be studied and looked at from a third-party perspective, so that way we don't have these issues moving forward.
All right, Maurice Turner, thank you so much for your insight and expertise. Let's turn now back to Washington, where President Trump is preparing to deliver his State of the Union address to Congress. He'll be the second president to give the address under the cloud of impeachment, but the first to do so while facing re-election. So what will the president's message be, and will he mention impeachment? ABC News Chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl has the very latest from Washington.
On the eve of his certain acquittal in the Senate, White House officials say President Trump won't talk much, if at all, about impeachment tonight. One Democratic senator says that's fine with him.
If he does some kind of a victory lap on impeachment, I don't think that helps anybody.
Democrats failed to get a single Republican in the House or the Senate to support impeachment or removal, although some condemned the president's actions.
It was wrong for President Trump to mention former Vice President Biden on that phone call, and it was wrong for him to ask a foreign country to investigate a political rival.
Speaker of the House Pelosi will be standing right behind the president, just as she was last year. The two leaders have not spoken since Speaker Pelosi stood up and walked out of a meeting at the White House in October.
And John Karl joins us now from the White House with more. John, you've said that he's not going to talk about the impeachment, but what can we expect from the president as far as message and tone tonight?
White House officials tell me, Lindsay, that he's going to have a positive and optimistic tone, that he's going to be forward-looking, that this is about setting the tone for his re-election, touting the successes of his administration, the economy, the trade deal with Mexico and Canada that was signed in January, his taking out of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian leader, that it's going to be about his accomplishments, but I got to tell you, it's hard to imagine that the president won't be tempted to say at least something about this impeachment process, one that has clearly bothered him, Lindsay, and one in which he expects what he will declare full vindication tomorrow when the Senate votes on that either acquittal or removal, and obviously it will be acquittal.
Right. A lot of people certainly listening to hear if there's going to be kind of a victory lap with him just maybe hours away from his certain acquittal. Thank you, John Carl from the White House. And remember to keep it right here on ABC News Live for full coverage of the State of the Union and the Democratic response. It all starts at 8 p.m. Eastern. When we come back, it was the case that riveted a nation, a Dallas officer walking into the wrong apartment, killing her neighbor. And now for the first time, the video the jury never saw. The emergency evacuations underway, at least 400 Americans evacuating China, and we speak with one of them. And up next, the emotional confrontation. A father describes his son's pain dealing with racism at school and the shocking response from one father.
And we certainly do say good morning, America.
Hit it, people.
A lot of smiles around here this morning.
We can feel it in here, people. We can feel it.
Incredible.
We're going to celebrate. We got it all.
A big morning in Times Square. So much excitement.
Makes you feel good, though. Yeah. That's how I feel every morning.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty good.
You don't want to miss that.
This is going to be good.
ABC, Friday night, February 7th. Live, the first debate after Iowa and the last debate right before New Hampshire votes. The time is now and the stakes are high. Which Democrats will take to the stage? Who will emerge? And who will face this man in the 2020 election? The ABC debate, Friday night, February 7th, live at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific. Just days before New Hampshire votes on ABC and ABC News Live.
Most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
ABC News, America's #1 news source. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward. And download the app now and sign up to get important breaking news alerts wherever you are. It's a #1 true crime podcast.
There was a murder in Central Ohio. The man who committed that crime once sat on death row, but now he's on the run. His name is Lester Eubanks.
Now, listen as U.S. Marshals give stunning access in the manhunt to catch a fugitive.
Those 9 lives are running out, and we're going to catch up with Lester.
Follow the clues. Can you help U.S. Marshals catch this killer?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Have you seen this man? Listen free now on Apple Podcasts.
I automatically draw my gun thinking somebody's in my apartment that doesn't belong there. I say, let me see your hands. The person keeps moving around. I can't see where his hands are going. And so at that point, I feel like, you're going to kill me. He said, hey, aggressively.
And walk me through that from there.
After I shoot, I still have my gun out. I see he's down. So I get on my knees and holster up, calling 911, trying to do compressions and stay on the phone with 911. I'm telling him, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm like, hey, bud, stay with me. It was my apartment. Oh, no, sorry. I wasn't trying. I just wanted to go home at night.
That never-before-seen video was obtained by our Dallas station, WFAA. It's part of a nearly 52-minute interrogation. It shows former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger's initial police interrogation shortly after shooting and killing 26-year-old Botham Jean inside of his own home. The jury never saw this video. She was convicted of murder and sentenced to 10 years behind bars. All right, so let's try to set the scene here for this next story. A group of parents, they're at a school diversity inclusion meeting in Michigan. A Latino father, he has the mic. He starts talking about finding his son crying at night after kids were calling him names. Well, that's when another father then interrupts him and says something that makes the entire room gasp. ABC's Steve Osunsami has the story.
Right, that's right. Okay. You're right.
There's a heated debate tonight among parents in the suburbs of Ann Arbor, Michigan over race and immigration, and it grew hotter after this meeting with school officials over what the school system says are racist comments posted on social media by classmates. Adrian Iraola is the father of 2 former students. He was speaking about racism directed at his children when the meeting went south.
When I went to his bedroom to say goodnight, and he was crying because of the abuse that he was enduring in this school system.
Then why did you stay in Mexico?
The school district is predominantly white, and Tom Bertel, the parent who interrupted, was defending students who made the posts.
Try being white and walk in a black neighborhood, see what happens, you know? And like this incident where somebody made a little tweet. Okay, nobody was hurt in that. You know, nobody got hurt in that. It was done off campus.
This man is a father of a son who is on the receiving end of the racial slurs that got everyone here.
My son comes to school every day trying to get an education, but he has to deal with that BS.
Iraola came to this country 4 decades ago and now owns 3 Mexican restaurants.
Steve Osunsami joins us now live. Steve, I have to say, I was watching my TV screen really intently as this was going on, and then it just stopped. It was like the camera stopped rolling. So I was so curious, what happened next?
Well, the father, he continues to defend himself. Much of this takes place off camera. He was not thrown out of the meeting because, as he said, he has First Amendment rights, just like the students who shared some of these offending posts on social media. And, you know, it must be said, he speaks for a number of people in his community and across the country who are having similar conversations. I will say this, though, the school district is responding. We've been trying to reach them all day long, and they finally sent us a statement here this evening, just a short while ago, calling the comments from the father who made that, who issued that question, racist. And in their statement, they say, yesterday, February 3rd, an individual in the Saline community made racist remarks at a forum directed at one of the parents in our community. This type of bigotry goes against all of the values and beliefs in our school system. The school system also says they're continuing to chase this issue, and they want to make sure that both the parents and the students who are in this school district know that they are respected and that this is an inclusive environment.
You know, that had the potential to go left very quickly, but, you know, people, even though they were really shocked, they stayed really cool and calm in that room. Our thanks to you for bringing us that story, Steve. Oh, did you want to make a point? Go ahead, Steve.
I did. There's one other point. You just made a point that I think is important to underline, that this went left in a hurry. But one of the things to note in the video, Lindsay, is that you hear white parents calling this other parent out. Right. You see other people in the community responding to this and essentially saying that this is not acceptable, and that's something that we should underline.
Right, that this was not okay. Thank you very much, Steve, once again. And still ahead, one town's journey to redemption. Later in the show, a black basketball team sidelined during the segregation era, their trophies and their story hidden until now. And today's tweet of the day comes from Shadow Inc., the company behind the app causing so many problems in Iowa, tweeting, quote, "We sincerely regret the delay in the reporting of the results of last night's Iowa caucuses and the uncertainty it has caused to the candidates, their campaigns, and Democratic caucus goers." We'll be right back in a moment. Stay with us.
Seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall. This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protests.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want.
ABC News Live.
Streaming everywhere, right to you. ABC News Live. It's that easy to go there.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis. 18,000 tons. Patatas. Ismail? David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home. David, nice to meet you. This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm kind of a mess. I'm just kind of getting everything sorted and I gotta get ready to go. I'm excited, but at the same time I am tired and
worried.
This week has been stressful. We have to be prepared. We have to find transportation. I know what's gonna happen, so that's not gonna surprise me. It's just the whole, I'm not gonna not be stressed out until I'm on the plane, and I'm really excited to go back home. But
I'm excited about that too.
I know, right?
I'm packing up.
Packing up? Where are we going?
To the U.S.
To the U.S.?
Yeah.
Where are we going tonight?
Tonight we're going to the plane.
Are you excited?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't been there in 5 years. That's a long time.
It's a long time. 5 years.
Excited to go back home. That was Priscilla Dickey in videos that she sent to us. She's an American whose family is stuck in China right now, but Priscilla and her daughter will be heading back to the States after resolving the issue that had held them back. Her daughter's passport was with her husband in another part of the country. So many others still left behind. And now, a look at the coronavirus by the numbers, our daily look at the numbers behind the news. We start with 20,630. That's the latest figure from the World Health Organization on confirmed global cases of coronavirus. Chinese authorities have reported 490 deaths, with the second death outside of mainland China reported in Hong Kong overnight. 27 countries and territories around the globe currently have confirmed cases of the illness. And travel restrictions continue to spread. At least 54 airlines have suspended or reduced service to China, including all 3 U.S. airlines with flights to the country, while some 3,700 passengers and crew on board the Diamond Princess cruise ship were quarantined and screened off the coast of Japan after concerns about coronavirus. China has made a rare admission about its handling of the disease, saying in a report, "In response to the shortcomings and deficiencies, we must improve our national emergency management system and improve our abilities in handling urgent and dangerous tasks." This stunning image, take a look at that there from Wuhan, of countless rows of hospital beds set up at a convention center turned makeshift hospital, shows the scope of the challenge they're dealing with there. And tomorrow on this show, we're going to be giving you a more in-depth look at the coronavirus and see just what exactly life is like in the middle of the pandemic. Millions of people living under quarantine, fearful of a killer that nobody can see. We'll have a full report right here on ABC News Live. And still to come, candidates are now trying to move beyond Iowa. We'll have a live report from one rally next. And there is Bernie Sanders speaking live in New Hampshire right now. We are back in just a moment. Stay with us.
Ladies, are you ready?
Michael!
Sarah, come on, Kiki. I'm going to have some fun with this.
We're going to talk about the good.
We're talking right here in Times Square.
This is amazing, and it's funny.
I watch this show all the time.
Whoa! Stop! You know, we family. We out here.
We out here, y'all.
Reagan, Sarah, and Kiki.
It's daytime talk done differently. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central, and Pacific on ABC.
And that's the wrap.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Okay, imagine the morning. I'm talking about a good morning. Imagine starting your day off with friends. What's better than that? You know, like the crazy smart friend who always keeps you in the know. The friend with a huge heart and smile who just makes everything better. Imagine hearing from people who open your eyes and your heart. Imagine knowing what's coming next in the day ahead. Well, I get to live this each morning together with you. Imagine that. How blessed am I? And that's what makes it such a good morning, America.
ABC News honored winner of 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards, including the most prestigious honor, Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news choice.
It's your lunchtime escape.
Michael! Sarah!
Come on, Kiki. I'm going to have some fun with this.
Reagan, Sarah, and Kiki.
Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central, and Pacific on ABC.
Breaking news, context, analysis.
With today's extraordinary news cycle.
Now is the perfect time for ABC News Live.
A streaming news game changer. The time is now for ABC News Live. Get it, streaming everywhere.
What happened last night is simply unacceptable.
It's nearly a day late, but the Iowa Democratic Party has released partial caucus results.
The one thing I want you to know, we know this data is accurate.
This doesn't seem wildly off from the expectations, but they are unofficial numbers. They are incomplete numbers at this hour. And again, with only 62% reporting and no timeline outlined about how long it will be before we see the rest, it's impossible to know if this order of finish or these percentages are going to be the final ones in Iowa.
President Trump heading to Capitol Hill tonight to deliver his annual State of the Union address, talking inside the chamber that just 6 weeks ago voted to impeach him. That trial in the Senate likely lingering over his speech tonight after both sides concluded their closing arguments Monday.
Tomorrow, senators will vote either to acquit or remove the president from office.
The president expected to use the address as a relaunch of his 2020 campaign. And one thing we're told not to expect.
I've seen the speech, but I've not seen the word impeachment.
Humanity will eventually overwhelm calamity.
The second death from coronavirus outside of mainland China. In the virus's epicenter of Wuhan, that brand new hospital that was built in just 8 days has opened its doors, admitting patients. It has capacity for 1,000 patients, but it's still not enough. Chinese officials even using drones in Qingzhou to spray disinfectant and speak to people living in the lockdown zone.
The Department of Defense was tasked to provide housing for 1,000 evacuees.
To have the quarantine, that's probably a good thing, but so close to my home, not so much.
They are requesting multiple units. Multiple kids have been run over by a car.
Investigators piecing together why a vehicle plowed into students in a suburban Oklahoma City neighborhood, killing 2 students and injuring 4 others. It happened shortly after classes were finished. A group of cross-country track students from Moore High School running on the sidewalk, struck by a red pickup truck barreling down the street.
We just looked over and we saw people laying in the street.
Police say the suspect, 57-year-old Max Leroy Townsend, was caught 3 blocks away, seen here being given a field sobriety test, then taken into custody. Senior Rachel Freeman died at the scene yesterday. This morning, sophomore Yuridia Martinez, who had been hospitalized in critical condition, died today from her injuries.
This weekend and more, Townsend's own 28-year-old son was killed in this rollover wreck.
Tonight, newly released police body camera footage shows the moment a Fresno officer handcuffed a teen with autism who was having a seizure. The officer was responding to a 911 call. He allegedly put the teen in handcuffs because he claims he was trying to prevent him from hurting others. The boy's mother is outraged tonight. The incident is being reviewed by Fresno Police Internal Affairs. ABC News has obtained home surveillance video appearing to show a boy and his stepmother leaving the house the day he disappeared. She returned home hours later alone. The 11-year-old from Colorado has been missing now for more than a week. The video was captured by their neighbor's home security camera. Authorities tell us that they are looking at the video as the search for the little boy now intensifies. And in California, prosecutors have dropped the charges in a high-profile case against a surgeon who once appeared on a dating show. The doctor and his girlfriend were accused of drugging and sexually assaulting women. Another live look at New Hampshire, where Joe Biden is set to take the stage any moment. We'll keep an eye on that. And as you heard in the rundown, the state of Iowa has now apologized for its major blunder on the national stage in reporting the caucus results last night. Troy Price, the Iowa Democratic Party chair, he had the daunting task of walking up on that stage in front of the entire country and trying to explain why nearly 24 hours later we are still trying to definitively determine who won in Iowa. So as the momentum of the campaign heads to New Hampshire and the clock runs out on Iowa's 15 minutes of fame, the candidates reacted in real time. Bernie Sanders just addressing his supporters within the past 10 minutes.
Very proud to tell you that last night in Iowa, we received more votes on the first and second round than any other candidate.
We know that the three of us will be dividing up most of the delegates coming out of Iowa. I'm feeling good.
So we don't know precisely how many delegates we have or how many we'll get, but I feel really good about getting more than our fair share. Now it's time for New Hampshire to speak, and speak loudly.
And I am now in the top 5 for president.
And it validates for a kid somewhere in the community wondering if he belongs or she belongs or they belong in their own family. That if you believe in yourself and your country, there's a lot backing up that belief.
That was what some of the candidates had to say as their campaigns now move forward. Now let's see what ABC's Rachel Scott has to say. She has moved on to New Hampshire. Rachel, last night we talked to you in Iowa about how the more moderate candidates like Pete Buttigieg might do in the caucus. You're there at his latest campaign event. It seems like he's pretty much already declaring victory.
Yes, Lindsay, a victory lap indeed for Mayor Pete Buttigieg tonight from these very early results. It's a very early lift from him, and he's calling it some of the best news that he has heard in this campaign so far. And, you know, when I was on his campaign bus in Iowa, when he was crisscrossing the state, he told me the best way to settle who can beat President Trump in 2020 is to do well in the Iowa caucuses. And tonight, regardless of not having the full picture, regardless of still waiting for results, he will be taking a victory lap. The momentum from his last event carrying to this event here today. Lines were stretched outside of this building. But for the moderates in this race, this was really a battle over 31 counties. Those are the areas that voted for both President Obama and President Trump. And in the final days, Mayor Pete Buttigieg was really honing in on his message there, making his pitch as an electable candidate when electability is so important to Iowa voters. Remember, they're not just looking to set the tone for the next contest. They also have the battle scars from the 2016 election. They remember that President Trump won 93 out of 99 counties, something that they're not looking to repeat. Mayor Pete Buttigieg in that final stretch was also going after former Vice President Joe Biden. Turns out he is just 2 miles away from where we are right now, making his own pitch. This is all going to see how this race shapes up. That is the big question lingering over this tonight. Luckily, we only have 7 short or long days, depending on how much coffee you had, Lindsay, to find out. The New Hampshire primary is a week away.
It'll be here before you know it. Thank you, Rachel Scott, live from New Hampshire. All right, let's bring in our powerhouse political team to the conversation. ABC News political analyst Matthew Dowd and Democracy for America CEO and ABC News contributor Yvette Simpson. So, Matt, let's start with you. Why does finding out a day later that you won a state not have as much value if the victory is delayed, say, 24 hours?
Well, the whole thing about Iowa is that Iowa actually, if you do well or surprise, like Pete Buttigieg seems to have done, then it gives you a launching point to raise money and to do better in other primaries that you haven't been campaigning in. And that's the theory, and that's normally what's panned out in the past. What's happened this time is basically one day was cut off. We've moved now to they announced partial results today in the midst of the President's State of the Union. So he has a State of the Union we're all covering tonight.
And then they vote on impeachment tomorrow, and then we have an ABC debate on Friday. So I think there's going to be very little momentum out of this, and which is a downside to somebody like Pete Buttigieg who needed in this. So it's almost as if a caucus was held, but it's going to have no real fundamental effect on the following states.
Right, to the dismay of many of the candidates. And Yvette, even before this blunder, there were already people who didn't trust the system. How does this feed into that, undermine the integrity of the democratic process? Are you there with us, Yvette?
Yes, I think we were having some technical difficulties. I'm here now. Hi, Lindsay.
How you doing, Yvette? Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
You know, I wanted to just get a sense of there are already people who didn't trust the system. How does this feed into that, and how does that potentially undermine the integrity of the democratic process now?
You know, you think about 2016 and Russian interference, people not believing that their votes are going to count, and then you get off the block in Iowa, and it's a technical glitch coming from the Democratic Party. It really is not the way you want to start this contest. But it's early, and so we're asking people to be patient. The good news is that there was some backup paper. They're counting the votes now, and we expect to get a result soon. And Nevada is able to learn from this, and so we expect that Nevada to be a little bit more clean than what we saw here in Iowa. But not the start we wanted, for sure, Lindsay.
Of course, not the start that many anticipated. Yvette, just staying with you for a moment, many people have already pushed back on the tradition of always starting with Iowa first.
Yes.
Do you think that last night's debacle could end that tradition ultimately?
Honestly, I think for sure. You know, 91% of Iowa caucus goers are white. We know that doesn't reflect the diversity of our country, of our party, and so people had already had an objection to that. You got Iowa and Nevada doing caucuses. You've got South Carolina and New Hampshire doing primaries. You really need consistency. And when things like this happen in Iowa, it starts to make us believe we should probably have more consistency in the early states. And so it's really, really important for us to get this right. This is the most important election in our generation, and we cannot be the reason that this doesn't work out.
And Matt, you've said that two clear winners were Donald Trump and Michael Bloomberg from last night's Iowa caucus. How so?
Well, I think Donald Trump lives and breathes in chaos, and because the Iowa caucus went so badly and was such a debacle, that benefits him, and he's going to go from that debacle among the Democrats of chaos to a State of the Union address, which we all understand he's supposed to be delivered in a calm, clear way. We'll see what happens tonight. So that benefits him. And Michael Bloomberg, who skipped Iowa, spent no dollars, put no staff, and is betting on his ability to skip all the first round and then emerge and spend a lot of money in the later rounds when all the rich delegates are in place. That helps him in this. So if there was a winner through the first 24 hours, or winners, it was Donald Trump. He loves chaos, and this is very chaotic. And Michael Bloomberg, who didn't want Iowa to give anybody much momentum, and it didn't really give anybody momentum. So of two winners, those are the two winners from yesterday.
And I want to toss this question out to both of you. Biden not likely placing in the top three in Iowa. What does that say about his electability and his momentum going forward? Yvette, we'll start with you.
Yeah, quite simply, you can't say you're the most electable if you don't win a contest. I think what he's hoping for is that he can get through New Hampshire, and then South Carolina and Super Tuesday, when you get more black and brown voters, he expects to get a surge. That's the opposite of what Pete Buttigieg is going through. He really needed a win here in Iowa. He needs a win in New Hampshire. And when you get to black and brown voters in South Carolina and Super Tuesday, he is not going to be able to win the day. So it'll be interesting to see, once we get through the fourth contest, how all of this works out.
And Matt, your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's very problematic for Joe Biden. He started as the lead candidate, raised a lot of money. He was a vice president under the most popular president Democratic president in the last 50 years, Barack Obama, U.S. senator for a lengthy period of time. He finishes fourth, it looks like, in Iowa. If he doesn't win New Hampshire, which I don't think is expected, he has to compete well in Nevada, and he has to do well in South Carolina. But I'm going to just recall one thing. In 1992, Bill Clinton didn't win his first primary until 5 primaries or caucuses in. And he only won 1 of the first 11. And so this is a lot of more time left in this race to see who's going to emerge.
All right, that's good perspective. Thank you so much to both of you, Yvette Simpson and Matthew Dowd. Next to that disturbing hit-and-run incident in Oklahoma involving a driver in a pickup truck hitting 6 high school runners and then driving away. 2 of those teens were killed, the others hospitalized, some now in critical condition. We're learning more about the driver whose son died in that car accident. ABC's Victor Oquendo joins us live in a moment, but first, here's a look at what happened.
Tonight, the driver of this red pickup truck is facing manslaughter charges after plowing into a group of students on a sidewalk.
They've got a car out there running over multiple children.
Just after school let out Monday in Moore, Oklahoma, police say 57-year-old Max Townsend barreled into 6 members of the high school cross-country team, killing 2.
We just looked over and we saw people laying in the street.
Senior Rachel Freeman, a rising star in the sport, pronounced dead on the scene. Her teammate, sophomore Yuridia Martinez, was pulled from this nearby pond and died from her injuries this morning.
Some other students actually jumped in the water to help.
There were several that jumped in the water. They started life-saving measures on her immediately.
They're doing a sobriety test on this driver right now.
Police say Townsend showed signs of impairment during his field sobriety test and are waiting on the results of a blood test. Authorities say he has a history of DUIs. Adding to the tragedy, this weekend in Moore, Townsend's own 28-year-old son was killed in this rollover wreck.
And Victor joins us now live from Oklahoma City at the student school. Give us a sense, Victor, about the suspect's past and what police are now saying.
Yeah, Lindsay, I did ask police about Max Townsend's background. They told me he has an extensive criminal history, including DUI, leaving the scene of accidents, and drug possession. I asked if he should be on the roads at all. They told me that is part of their investigation. Tonight, he is being held on $1 million bond. We're here inside the gym at Moore High School in Moore, Oklahoma. It was actually pretty packed earlier. They were holding a vigil for the victims. 3 of those students are still in the hospital. 1 of them is still in critical condition. Lindsay?
Our thoughts certainly with those families. Thank you to you, Victor. Turning now to the buzz surrounding the documentary The Cave. The Nat Geo film is up for an Oscar this weekend and shows the conflict of the Syrian war from a female doctor's perspective. That doctor's underground hospital saved thousands, and our Ariel Reshef sat down with her shortly after she arrived in the U.S.
She's the doctor at the center of National Geographic's haunting Oscar-nominated documentary. The Cave follows the subterranean struggle of Dr. Amani Balour, the first female physician to run a hospital in war-ravaged Syria. A region so dangerous, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, more than 500,000 people have been killed since the beginning of the Syrian civil war. Balour taking viewers on a chilling journey to a makeshift medical center beneath her besieged Damascus suburb of Al-Ghouta, where she and her colleagues secretly treated thousands of men, women, and children tormented by daily bombardment.
A lot of doctors flee. I decided to stay.
So the doctor, straight out of medical school, stayed as her hometown was decimated, targeted by the Syrian regime in a brutal chemical weapons attack. Balour sitting down with ABC News just hours after arriving in the U.S. for the first time.
This is your first interview beyond the documentary here in the United States. What do you want the world to know?
I want them to know that we are civilians and we want to live as other humans, just in dignity and freedom.
The now 32-year-old saying she was reticent to allow cameras to follow her.
It's very dangerous because the Assad regime and his allies were targeting hospitals and people were angry of the cameras. And my community didn't accept that to see a camera follow women. I was hopeless at that time, that no one will care about us, no one will do anything for us to help us. So I wanted this story to stay, to tell the truth about what's happening in Syria and what is still happening now.
Balour ultimately risking her life to bear witness.
This is our testimony on the crimes against the humanity.
Why was it so important to tell your truth through this documentary?
This is important now because everything you saw in the cave is still happening now, and we want to end this war, to stop bombing.
ليش ما في مدير يعني زلمه يكون قد حاله ويحسن يامن الادويه؟
المستشفى اللي فيها مدير عم يقدر يامن ادويه، ما عم تقول لي معلقه الدواء لا هون ولا برا.
اصلا المراه ما لازم تشتغل نهائيا، المراه لازم تقعد في البيت.
And the situation underground made all the more complex by deeply rooted rejection of a woman in the workplace, a notion Ballur fought to change.
How did you deal with some of the misogyny in your environment?
I believe that there is no difference between men and women. We were working together in the hospital. We witness everything together. So there's no difference. This is more pressure on me. I was the manager of the hospital. I wanted to prove to them that women can do that because I was the first one. And if I failed in this position, that would affect all the women. They will talk about all the women that they can't. This is an example.
For 6 painstaking years, the aspiring pediatrician withstood societal pressure, sleep deprivation, trauma, and heartbreak, caring for her patients with compassion.
شو بدك تصيري لما تكبري؟ ما مقررة لسه؟ مو لازم تعرفي شو لازم تصيري؟ طيب نحن ليش عايشين؟ مشان شو؟ ما بتعرفي ليش عايشين؟ عايشين مشان نصير شغلة مهمة. بصير نكون هيك عاديين؟ لكن لازم نصير شغلة مهمة.
One of the things in watching The Cave that struck me is your composure and humanity despite what was happening around you. How did you maintain that throughout?
I tried to save people, to help them. That's why I wanted to stay, because I wanted to help. And I tried to focus on my work, but of course it wasn't easy.
Ballur forced to abandon her covert practice and flee in 2018. Now living in Turkey, granted a visa to enter the United States just in time for the Oscars.
What do you think it will be like to hear The Cave called out over the speaker at the Oscars?
It's really a pride and honor to hear that, to all the people know what happened in The Cave. This story is my reality, it's not a movie.
Her mission stretching far beyond the concealed, cavernous hospital she helped sustain. Dr. Ballur hoping to shine a light on the hundreds of thousands killed and millions displaced in her country during the nearly 9-year civil war.
I try to support myself to be their voice now because they are voiceless. They need someone to talk about them, to talk about the suffering.
So many have referred to you as a hero. Do you believe you're a hero?
I'm a human. I believe in humanity, and that's why I did what I did, because I believe in humanity.
Ariel Reshef, ABC News.
Our thanks to Ariel for sharing that story. When we come back, it is never too late to say, I'm sorry. One town's journey righting a wrong of segregation.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline. ABC, Friday night, February 7th. Live, the first debate after Iowa and the last debate right before New Hampshire votes. The time is now and the stakes are high. Which Democrats will take to the stage? Who will emerge? And who will face this man in the 2020 election? The ABC debate, Friday night, February 7th, live at 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific. Just days before New Hampshire votes on ABC and ABC News Live.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis. 18,000 tons. Patatas. Ismail? David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home. David, nice to meet you. This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much.
We certainly do say good morning, America. A lot of smiles around here this morning.
We can feel it in here, people. We can feel it.
Incredible. Big morning in Times Square. We're going to celebrate.
You don't want to miss that.
This is going to be good.
Ladies, are you ready? Michael! Sarah, come on, Kiki. I'm going to have some fun with this. We're going to talk about the good. We're talking food. Right here in Times Square.
This is amazing, and it's funny.
I watch this show all the time. Whoa! You know, we family.
We out here.
We out here, y'all. Trajan, Sarah,
Central and Pacific on ABC.
And that's a wrap.
Welcome back. That is a live look at the Capitol ahead of tonight's State of the Union. Our coverage starts at the top of the hour, so keep it right here. But before we go, a community comes to terms with its past wrongs and tries to make it right. ABC's Will Carr has more.
For more than 4 decades, the Douglas Tigers dominated opponents on the basketball court. Their pictures, spanning from the 1940s to the 1960s, show young teenagers with a true love for the game. While the images are black and white, the memories are far more murky. Douglas was a segregated all-black high school in Kingsport, Tennessee, a quiet town nestled into the Holston River that, at the time, was split by race, much like the rest of the country. In the South, Jim Crow laws mandated that blacks segregate themselves in public, many forced to drink out of separate water fountains, and even eat in separate parts of restaurants.
Well, there were a lot of places we couldn't go, or there were things that we couldn't do. Movies, theaters, we had to sit upstairs. We could not sit on the first floor.
In the late 50s and early 60s, Maxie Dobbins Johnson played guard on the high school girls team, winning trophy after trophy. Competing against other all-black schools, the boys team even won a state championship before the school shut down in 1966. Many of their trophies disappeared. They were placed inside the pristine cases in Dobbins-Bennett, the all-white high school across town.
That big tall one was right here. That trophy stood out like a sore thumb.
For decades, students and alumni assumed that trophy had been earned by white athletes during the segregation era.
It was painful to see that. It was painful to walk by and know that it was just sitting there by itself.
Calvin Sneed, the Douglas High School historian, discovered the mistake. Sneed then found dozens of the lost Douglas trophies stuffed in cardboard boxes inside a dusty closet on the Dobbins-Bennett campus.
Those trophies needed to come home. There were players, there was alumni that wanted to know what happened to our trophies, and to find them was a blessing.
Then Chris Poole, the current head coach of the Dobbins-Bennett boys team, found out about the trophies and the athletes they really belonged to.
The basketball team, they took hand-me-down jerseys from Dobbins-Bennett, and they would dye them in their school colors.
According to the old-timers, during games, that dye would bleed onto the court.
Our guys couldn't fathom living in those times, and that just shows that we've come a long way.
So the city pledged to remember the men and women who played for a school long forgotten.
We realized that we had a very rich history in both our high schools.
That history includes 94-year-old William Hickman.
Does this guy look familiar?
Yeah, a little bit.
That's you. It says that you were the captain of the football team and the co-captain of the basketball team. Mm-hmm. What position did you play?
Forward. I never did score that many points, but I rebounded a lot.
93-year-old Richard Watterson, on the other hand, had a knack for the net.
I remember making a lot of points.
You made a lot of points? Did it feel special to you to be part of that team?
We won.
Do you harbor any animosity against the people who discriminated against you?
No, sir.
Why is that?
I worked through it.
More than 70 years later, Watterson and all the other Douglas Tigers, some moving a little slower than they once did on the court, finally got the full recognition from their community they've always deserved. All invited to a trophy presentation at the Dobbins-Bennett basketball games over the weekend. For one special night, the current players even traded in their normal gray and maroon jerseys for the original Douglas colors, sky blue and gold.
Just as an African-American teacher and coach myself, it helps me pay homage to what those have come before us have done.
That acknowledgement scored big with the former Douglas players.
A long time coming. But I'm glad it has arrived. So it's just realizing that we are all valued, we are all important, and we all need to live together.
I think that's great advice.
Today, more than 50 years after the Douglas Tigers won their last game, their accomplishments and the stories behind them are now on full display.
The past has to be acknowledged. You can't know your history until you look back and see where you've come from.
In Kingsport, Tennessee, Will Carr, ABC News.
Our thanks to Will for that story. Those trophies back with their rightful owners. Well, that is our show for this hour. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Our State of the Union coverage starts next. Thanks for streaming with us.